It's just over a month now since I ran Kullamannen. This was my second 100-mile race. It's UTMB's Swedish event, and yeah, it was pretty brutal. It was, yeah, quite an experience. So I just kind of wanted to do a quick video, kind of talk through my experience, my thoughts, and kind of recap it. So yeah, I mean, getting to this race to start with was kind of a bit of an experience. The race is on the west coast of Sweden. The finish line is in a town called Båstad, and that's where the expo is. That's where you get your registration, bib. Because the race starts at 6 p.m. at night, and I was staying with my girlfriend's family in Gothenburg, which is about 2 hours north. So I was like, perfect, I'll stay with the family, I'll travel down to the race that day, and then perfect. And then I can travel back after the event the following evening. There's normally a direct train from Gothenburg to Båstad. There were train issues that day. I think they were doing some sort of planned works, but it meant that in order to get to the race, on the day of the race, I ended up having to get like 4 buses and 2 trains. Yeah, so that was a bit of an experience, especially as somebody who's pretty poor at speaking Swedish. So yeah, just trying to struggle my way around public transport in a different country was an interesting challenge. Not the most relaxing day to build up to a race, but I got to Båstad. Really nice expo, little like sort of town by the water. Lovely place. Got registered. Got everything I needed, got changed, and jumped on a coach to the start line. We arrived at the start line, I think it was about an hour and a half before the race, or maybe an hour before the race started. So they took us over to this like sports hall, just to do like a race briefing, usual stuff. I did find that at that start line, the toilet queue was absolutely massive. So I think for the men there was like 1 or 2 cubicles, and obviously there's like hundreds of runners there, so it was a bit chaotic. But we went into this sports hall, and the sun was just going down, and so we were finally ready to go, ready to get to the start line, and as we left it was pitch black, so it was pretty much from the off, it's okay, we're going into this race, starting at night time, starting in the dark. It was a bit chaotic getting to the start line to figure out where to go. Managed to find the start corral, and yeah, it was lined up ready to go. It was a pretty intense start. I think most of my experience with ultramarathons has been lots of people standing around, one guy with a megaphone, and then it's usually like 6 a.m. in the morning and you're running into the sunrise. This was very different. Lots of music, lots of lights, flashing strobing lights, and intense sort of speeches. People were cheering. So yeah, not the most relaxing start to a 100-mile ultramarathon. And unfortunately, I didn't get to see the big sort of horse that was riding round at the start line, which looked pretty cool, but yeah, I just was sort of in the back with all of the other runners, but yeah, I wasn't anywhere near the elites at the front of the race. And we set off, and pretty much from the off we were running along the coast, heading north, into a pretty strong headwind. It was a pretty brutal start to the race. So the first 10-11 kilometres we were just running along the coast. It was flat, but it was just this like headwind that just came straight at us. So ran along there for about an hour and a half, just getting absolutely blasted by the wind. And you can see in the video, I was just like, all I was thinking about was, can I get through this section, because it's just like an hour and a half of just constantly having wind hit you. We got to the first aid station in Merli after about an hour and a half. It was a pretty lightweight aid station, just had water and this energy drink that didn't taste great, so yeah, just went in there, topped up my bottles, and carried on. And that's where we started the first of the 2 loops around Kullamannen. I massively underestimated this like loop. It's on like a headland, which is like a nature reserve. None, or if any, very few houses. Basically just like a woodland nature reserve. And you head off, and it's kind of, it's on the coast, and you're running along the edge, and it's kind of technical, rocky terrain, and quite steep. So steep uphills, steep downhills, and at first you had this like section where it was kind of like lots of rocky steps, some sort of technical sections where people were taking a bit of a while to get through it, where they're having to like pull themselves up with some ropes, and it did back up a little bit. So I think at this point I was like 300th, 350th. So there was a lot of people around me, and there was quite a queue at times. But we kind of made our way up to this lighthouse. Actually, I really enjoyed running around that like technical rocky bits. It was quite fun. But then after the lighthouse, it kind of turned into these steep woodland trails, so steep downhills, steep uphills, and the footpath was just covered in leaves, like a complete layer of leaves the whole way around, and underneath the leaves were roots sticking out and rocks, and some of the rocks were like small and some of them were pretty significant. So you spent most of that loop focusing on trying not to trip. I did have one really bad fall where I was running downhill, and caught my foot and just fully tumbled and rolled down quite a rocky footpath. It was like, big chunky boulders, and I just rolled across them, and I finally stopped and I was okay, but I did have to check my arm because I was a bit nervous that I might have like broken my arm because I came down on it pretty hard, but I was alright and just kind of brushed it off and slowly eased on and got back going. But I did see quite a few people who'd had to drop out because they'd had some sort of bad fall, whether they twisted their ankle or done their knee in or whatever, and there's quite a few people that dropped out on those loops just because it was tough going. It's about 24k, and so each loop took about like 3.5 hours, and it required a lot of energy at night time with the head torch to just constantly watch where you're putting your feet. So I found these two loops really, really draining, especially when I got to the second one. That first loop, I didn't really know what to expect. By the time I got to the second, I knew that it was going to be pretty tough, and mentally I really struggled with those two loops, just knowing that I was doing the same section twice and how technical and mentally draining that section was. I did find during that section on Kullamannen that I don't think my leg strength was quite up to it, at least compared to other runners. Anytime we got to a steep uphill, people were going maybe twice as fast as me. And now there were some people with poles and they were power hiking, fine, I expect them to be faster. But there were other people who were just, walking up the hills faster than me. So, I don't know, I just felt like I didn't have the strength in order to maintain the pace that maybe I should have been on those hills. Maybe it's just a bit of a reflection of next time I do an event like this, and it's just, making sure that I do a decent amount of strength work, even if it is a flat race. But then again, maybe I was just pacing it better than other people. It's really hard to tell during these ultras. But yeah, got through those two loops and I was so relieved to be done. I was just so happy to have that loop done. Went down to the aid station at Merli. So I'd already been through that aid station twice. Once when I got to the headland on Kullamannen, and then once when I finished the first loop. And then when you got to finish the second loop of it, you then went into a different section and they suddenly had food. Now, I kind of planned to only use my own gels, so I was carrying all of my own food, but some people really didn't appreciate how much they expect you to be self-sufficient in these events. So there were people at that aid station who were absolutely cooked because they had been running for like 7.5 hours and they had not eaten barely any calories. So there were people there like properly trying to recover. So yeah, it was, I think it caught a few people off guard how the aid stations literally had water and then this like energy drink and nothing else. which, you know, I've not experienced in other races. Like, you do the Centurion races here in the UK, and every aid station's got everything you could possibly imagine. And you do it in the heat, like I did on the South Downs Way, and they even have, like, they're topping up buckets of ice, like amazing aid stations. Whereas they've designed this race in Kullamannen to be as hard as possible, because they don't have the mountains. So they're right, okay, how can we make this more challenging? But yeah, it did catch a few people off guard, and definitely added to the challenge for people. One thing I had to do at this aid station that I've never had to do on an ultramarathon before is use the toilet. And I think that's because of the timing. So having to use a portaloo during an ultramarathon, I think it's because we started the race at 6 p.m. and my digestion isn't used to suddenly starting running at 6 p.m. at night. So yeah, that was a new one for me. But yeah, got out of that aid station and got onto the flat. And I left that aid station at maybe like 2 in the morning, I want to say. And I had until set about 5 hours until I got to the halfway aid station. And it was flat running, so we'd got through the hills, which was, you know, a bit of a relief, but it was a relentless running and flat running in the dark. And I found it quite mentally challenging, just not being able to see your surroundings, being like, oh, I've been running for 13 hours, but I can't see anything. And I haven't seen the scenery. I'm sure we're running in beautiful places, but yeah, it was quite a unique experience, you know, not seeing where you're running for such a long time. Yeah, it definitely added to the sort of the mental challenge of the event. But yeah, we just worked our way along the coast, and finally at about 7 a.m. I got to the halfway aid station, and finally got to refresh my gels. During this race I was using precision gels, so I had their 90-gram pouches, and then also the smaller gels, and I was trying to aim for one of those pouches every like hour and a half, which I think I did quite well with for the first 3/4 of the race. And when I went back and looked at how many gels I took throughout the whole event, I realised that in the last 5-6 hours of the race, I barely took any, and I don't know whether I was just physically exhausted or something, but I just stopped consuming as much, and I got to the finish line and I suddenly realised I had a whole nother batch of them in my pocket that I just hadn't touched. So yeah, I think I did quite well, and I really enjoyed those precision gels. They just work for me, and they're not too expensive, so it's always good. But yeah, got to the halfway aid station, and the temperature just absolutely plummeted. I must have had like 10 layers, like I'm talking thermals, trousers, shorts, woolly hats, gloves, anything that I could, basically anything that I have for running to wear. I had full waterproof trousers because I thought they might be like proper winter storms, and I had a waterproof Solomon jacket on. And at that aid station, I reckon the temperature suddenly just like plummeted to like -5, -10, because I was freezing. But I know with that gear, I should be perfectly warm at about like 0 degrees, if not colder. So it was very cold. Suddenly everything just frosted over, like puddles freezing and such. To be fair, they did have a big tent where they were pumping in hot air, so you could go have some proper hot food and warm up, but I just kind of wanted to get moving and get finished. So I just, grabbed my stuff, went to the toilet again, and then set off. And as we left, the section after that halfway aid station was mental, and they've clearly extended the course so that the whole length of the route is 100 miles, but you're basically running around this woodland where it's like this sandy surface, so like hard running, and it's up and down over these like little bumpy hills, and twisty and turny, and you're basically looping around in circles, and it really does feel like you're running around in circles. And I feel like it must have gone on for like half an hour, but it just felt like it was never ending. It was like you finally get refreshed at the halfway aid station. It's just this like really hard section where you're just like running around. You're like, where am I going? It's nice when you can actually see where you're going because you feel like you're making progress, but yeah, that was a bizarre area to be running around. But yeah, as the sun came up, I suddenly realised my eye, and I mentioned this in the video. Never had this before in a race, but suddenly my eye just was clouded over. I was like, what is that? I was trying to rub it off and it just wouldn't go. And I suddenly realised if I closed my right eye, I couldn't really see anything. There was this like milky, cloudy layer over, and I could just see the outline of the horizon. And what I realised is that in the first section, when we were running head first into the wind, you've got this headwind coming straight into the left eye, but because it's dark and you're running with a head torch, you have to constantly pay attention. You can't really close your eyes. You don't want to like trip or fall over. And so you're just running for hours in darkness and your eyes just getting strained, and yeah, basically my eye clouded over and suddenly I couldn't see anything. But I'm suddenly in the middle of this race. I've got 3 hours to the next aid station. I've got like 11 hours until the finish line, and suddenly I can't see out of one eye. What went through my mind at this like moment was kind of a bit mental. Like I was like, oh God, I need to see a medic. I need to talk to a medic. What's going on with my eye? And then I realised that, oh, but if I talk to a medic and they might make me drop out of the race. Maybe I shouldn't talk to a medic because I don't want to drop out. But then I was like, oh, but what if I don't talk to a medic and suddenly I'm blind in one eye for the rest of my life? So I quickly pull out my phone. I'm Googling, like, is it normal for ultra runners to lose vision in one eye during a race? And it was like, yeah, this is perfectly normal. It normally clears up a few hours after the race. I was like, what? It's mental. So I was like, I don't know if I trust this. But anyway, I carried on. And we were running along. And then we had this period where suddenly the wind just completely drops. It's really nice and still and calm. And suddenly my eye starts to like recover a bit, and I'm like, oh, I can actually start to see again. And suddenly I realised it's not permanent, it will recover. So I was like, okay. That kind of gave me some relief to just kind of crack on and keep moving. But I was really lucky. It was only one eye. Other people during the race had both eyes, and so I had to drop out. If it happened to both eyes, you could not run the race. You really couldn't see anything. So yeah, I was kind of lucky, and the wind picked up again and it got worse again, and so when I got to the finish line I really couldn't see out of that left eye at all, and that was kind of, for the most part of that second half of the race, it was just running with one eye. But yeah, that was a mental experience. After the race, an hour or two later, my eye was perfectly normal, but yeah, it was pretty unnerving. But yeah, cracked on. The second half of this race is, you're running along this, beautiful coastline. It's, loads of beautiful Swedish houses along the way. You're running along like beaches and paths, and it's pretty runnable, although there are some sections where there's like, you're on a beach and it's like loads of big boulders and really easy to twist an ankle. So we were just like walking over those sections. But I was chatting to some of the guys out there, and we were talking about like the elite runners. I don't know how they run fast over that terrain. There were large sections where they have to have been walking, otherwise just so much risk that you're going to just twist an ankle. But yeah, it was some interesting terrain. But I did get to sort of chat to people in that second half of the race, and I met two guys, and I ran with them for most of the second half of the race. One guy was from Stockholm and one guy was from Australia but lives in London. And so we started running together. It makes such a big difference having people to run with during these longer ultras. It makes them so much more enjoyable. The one thing that I found when I did Ultramarathon back in August is that nobody wanted to talk to me in the second half of that race. So I would try and talk to people, and to be fair to them, I'm trying to speak to them in English, and most of them were Swedish. So they were tired running an ultra and they didn't want to chat to me. But I found that during this race, having those two guys to chat to made such a big difference. It made it so much more enjoyable to battle on. And we were running along chatting and suddenly realised that we were really touch and go in terms of where we were going to finish before it went dark. And we were like, oh, I don't want to finish in the dark, so I can't run in another night. So we started working together, pushing the pace. We'd run for a bit, walk for a bit. and just kind of maintaining that momentum just to make sure that we didn't drop off from a pacing perspective. But yeah, we just kept grinding, working our way through the aid stations again. Aid stations, other than those, after that halfway mark, it was just water and energy drinks for the aid stations to the finish. So you didn't have a whole lot of like additional calories that you could pick up on the way. And I did find that my energy levels really started to drop towards the end, and I think, you know, just a bit of underfueling really. We got to the last aid station, and then you've got 2 hills where there's like 400 meters of elevation, which is not much, but the first one is a bit of a steep hill. Made our way through those 2 hills. I found that the uphills were just like a nice relief. Like, you're running 100 miles, finally getting to walk up a hill for, you know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes or longer is actually, you can recover a bit and gain back some of your energy. So I did actually quite enjoy those hilly sections. But then when we got over the top and I started running downhill, I realised my feet were just wrecked. And this must have been from when I was running around Kullamannen and stubbing my feet on every rock and route. But both my big toe and my pinky toe on both feet were just so sore and tender. And yeah, they didn't look great after the race, but every step when I was running downhill was just pain. So it wasn't really enjoyable running downhill. But yeah, got through those two hills, and then had about like 5 and then ran along the coastline and got to Borstad where the finish is, and had to do like a little loop. It was another like 4K loop, and at that point I suddenly saw my girlfriend's mum and just people were there cheering, and suddenly I'm like, okay, I'm nearly there, I'm nearly at the finish, and just started to get really emotional. Like I said in the video, like just this like relief of finally being finished. Like, this race just completely drained me physically and mentally. Like, I was so happy to be done, that I just started to get like emotional. Like, I've never had that before. So yeah, it was an interesting experience, but yeah, it was, yeah, I just running up that finish line knowing that I was done and I could stop running, and that I was going to make it before the sun went down, and yeah, ran up through that red carpet to the finish and got my ring. I actually really like that they do the ring rather than medals or the buckles. It's yeah, something nice, bit unique, but yeah, got my ring, and yeah, I was just done. I was wrecked, and yeah, it was a bloody tough race, and just like physically hard, mentally hard from the off. The wind in that first 10k, and then straight onto those 2 laps of Kullamannen, and also just to have that mental challenge of darkness from the beginning and having just the physical exhaustion. It just made it really, really hard for an event. Like, compare it to my South Downs Way 100, this is a far harder event, far harder. Yeah, it was brutal, but got changed, had some food at the finish line, and jumped in the car. And you think, I've missed a full night's sleep, it's now like, you know, 5-6 p.m. at night, and I'm jumping in a car to drive back to Gothenburg. You think I'd be straight asleep, but the adrenaline was just pumping, and I'm not the most chatty person in the world, but I just couldn't shut up. I was like talking for about an hour solid, talking about all different things, recapping the race, and then suddenly I fell asleep. Suddenly fully passed out. It's clearly the adrenaline just wore off, and I just fell asleep and woke up an hour later, and we were back in Gothenburg and had a nice pizza, fell asleep, and that first night's sleep was just, perfect. Like, must have slept for like 10, 11 hours, felt great. Woke up and I was like, could barely walk and I was stiff, but at least I was like, actually kind of like rested after that sleep. But yeah, I recovered pretty well from the race. So my body physically, after a few days, stopped hurting so much, and probably could run after a week, but I sort of was a bit cautious. I did find, from a recovery perspective, the thing that affected me most in this race was, I think my immune system got absolutely cooked, because it's been, just over a month since the race, and I've had so many colds and illnesses that this reason why my training's been a bit light for the last 2 weeks is just because I've been picking up colds. Like right now I've got like a chesty cough that I can't seem to get rid of, that's like properly, my lungs are like blocked up. But yeah, anytime I'm in the office with people at work and somebody's got an illness, I'm picking it up like that. So yeah, not ideal, but hopefully that'll I'll recover from that soon. But yeah, I mean, what a race. It was brutal. After this race, I'm kind of really reflecting on at what point do ultras become too hard? Do they stop being fun? And yeah, this race definitely pushed the limits of what I find enjoyable. I mean, I'm super proud of myself for finishing it, and what a beast of a race to do. Yeah, if you want to be tested, this is the one. But I think for me, looking forwards, it's understanding what is it about ultramarathons that I enjoy, like why do I do them. And for me, the South Downs Way 100 was beautiful, and it was hard, but it was stunning and an amazing experience. This was brutal and hard, and I'm really happy I got it finished, but it was so hard. And there were a lot less moments during that race where I was really enjoying myself. What a race. Happy I got it done. Need to figure out what's next. I've got Manchester Marathon in the spring, but I haven't really figured out what I'm doing from an ultra perspective going forwards. But yeah, well yeah, thanks for all the lovely comments on the video, and yeah, cheers for watching. Alright, bye.